Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies. Welcome, initiates. In today's episode, we chat with Otto English, a wonderful author, journalist, and commentator known for his incisive analysis of contemporary politics and historical narratives. We explore the varied views within political parties on Brexit and libertarianism, and highlight the alarming use of discriminatory rhetoric by some politicians. We will discuss how dark money influences political agendas and scrutinize figures like Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. Otto brings a fascinating perspective on ancestry, surprising royal connections, and debunked historical misconceptions. Our discussion casts light on conspiracy theories, the rise of political entertainers, the unchecked spread of bigotry, the influence of American think tanks on the UK's political landscape, and the romanticized ideologies driving Brexit. With a blend of wit, erudition, and a commitment to truth, Otto English captivates audiences, urging them to question established narratives and seek deeper insights into the forces that shape our world. This is Some Dare Call It Conspiracy with Otto English.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is a great pleasure for us. So,
thanks for having me.
No, not at all. Like, do you prefer Otto or Andrew or which?
Just call me Andrew. Why not?
Lovely stuff.
It's a lot easier. Weirdly, at Byline, they all call me Otto, even though they know me as Andrew for 6 or 7 years. And even my wife has got into the freaking habit. It would be quite nice to be called by my real name on a podcast about conspiracy theory.
Lovely stuff. There's loads that we'd like to talk to you about. Like, quite a lot of it seems to be a bit sort of intertwined. We definitely want to talk to you about reform and Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
The rise of the right wing, grifters, the potential rise of fascism, the mythic past that seems to inform this lunacy, and how that all connects to your books and your work exposing the nonsense that is Brexit as well. So yeah.
All in a cozy 10 minutes. No, joking.
Speak fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it just turn up the speed. Yeah, or slow it down, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. Right.
Let's start with Brexit because all things go back to Brexit.
Unfortunately.
You probably know this story well. Do you know the story of Dorothy Martin and the Clarions?
No.
Do you know that? Dorothy Martin and the Clarions. Dorothy Martin was a 1950 Chicago housewife who decided that she could communicate with some aliens on the planet Clarion, which was 10 million. It doesn't matter where it was because it doesn't exist. She decided she could communicate. She decided she could communicate with them. And so through a process of psychic writing where a pen would take her hand and she'd start writing mysterious stuff. And her cult was called the Seekers, not to be confused with the folk singing
the John Wayne film.
Or the New Seekers. I mean, it could be very Spinal Tap there. Or the New Seekers who who taught the world to sing through the medium of Pepsi Cola, or was it Coca-Cola? Anyway, she built up this cult, and they were very middle class, and they all believed the aliens were coming. And over the next 3, 4, 5 months, up to the 21st of December 1954, she decided and convinced these very middle class people to sell all their possessions and buy in to utter lunacy. Yeah, utter lunacy. And on the 21st of December, the Clarions failed to arrive. come the 24th of December, Dorothy had changed the prophecy and decided they were coming on Christmas Eve. And by now, news had got out. And all of the local people had gathered in the street waiting to see a spaceship arrive in suburban Chicago. And when it failed to arrive, there was a riot.
Oh.
And instead of accepting that her mythical prophecy might be a load of old bollocks, Dorothy changed the prophecy. And this was the origin of cognitive dissonance theory.
Oh.
Yes, I was going to say, this all sounds familiar now that you're bringing it up, but I didn't know the names. And then, yeah, I totally know.
Yes. It's a story I tell in my first book, and it was Leon Festinger who had infiltrated the group.
Right.
And he wrote a book called When Prophecy Fails, which was about how when prophecy fails, people keep changing the prophecy to suit the failure of the prophecy.
Mm.
And that's the origin of cognitive dissonance. Now, over the last, I hate talking about Brexit because it is such a boring subject. Everybody's talked it to death, but it is relevant to what we're going to talk about.
Yes.
Because since Brexit, the Conservative Party has become very much like the new seekers to Dorothy's original group. They've made this series of prophecies that the golden, the sunlit uplands will arrive, that the wonderful days will appear, and that all will be fixed and shiny. But they have to keep changing it, and they have become ever more cult-like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't agree, but they have become very cult-like, including they've going through that succession of leaders is what happens to religious cults. They'll have the original Messiah, and then they'll go through like a whole series of other, lesser leaders.
Yes.
As people break off and form their own factions and all this kind of thing. And yes, that is very similar to political cults down the ages. If you make any comparison between the modern Conservative Party and the Nazis, you've got to be very careful. But the Nazis too built almost their entire mythology upon this absolutely insane notion that they had sprung from Atlantis and that the German people were the people of Atlantis. And not all Nazis believed that, but some did. And that they were this mythical people. Brexit, at its root, in its conservative, cultish ideology, remains that. It remains the notion of an exceptional people, and that British are an exceptional people, that our history is more interesting, that we are somehow pre-armed against all that can be thrown at us, and that we have this indomitable kind of Blitz or Dunkirk spirit that will see us through like a magic potion. And really, that is no difference to the nuttiness that Dorothy Martin was spouting in 1954 in a Chicago suburb. The only difference is that eventually all of the seekers left the movement, whereas I suspect the decades down the line, there will still be people doing their psychic writing to the Brexit gods.
Well, it was interesting. I very recently, I think it was yesterday on Twitter, saw somebody arguing about Brexit and saying, we didn't get the Brexit that we were promised, or like lefties got in the way and stopped it from being delivered properly and such. No. And it's just like, that's absolutely not what happened at all. It's, it's totally against the actual fact.
The seekers, they blamed bra wire for the aliens not turning up.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
Dorothy had been told in her psychic writing that you were allowed no metal nearby. The aliens fell. And so when they first didn't arrive, they decided that the women in the group had screwed up. It was always the women's fault. The women had screwed up because they had bra wire in their bras and they hadn't thought of that. So they all stripped the wire out of their bras. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And as you say, that's about, it sounds like a stupid comical analogy, but every day on Twitter, you can see people doing the same thing, finding excuses for why the miracle landing of the aliens hasn't come. So it is extremely cult-like. And reform is, it's like evangelical churches in America, Reform, which sort of gave birth to the Brexit Baptist movement, has now become an alternative church, and all religions of a similar hue end up hating and purging each other. It's an absolute classic, which is what they seem to be doing now. They seem to be on a sort of, game of chicken with two juggernauts heading straight towards each other.
Yeah. I saw Richard Tice talking about like bringing up the concept of getting rid of the NHS and introducing an insurance-based healthcare system. I think that was either yesterday or today. Like I always assumed from looking at the sort of the parties involved in the dark money, involved in the Tufton Street influence and stuff like that, that was ultimately the potential point of Brexit, was to try and do what essentially think tanks like the IEA and the Adam Smith Institute have been trying to do for years and years and years. And the only reason that didn't happen was because Biden got elected and he realized that it would cause a huge furore with the Irish community in America, of all strange things.
That's an interesting. I think there are many. Well, there are many strands to it. Yeah, I'm currently actually researching the Peasants' Revolt. Yeah, and we all think of the Peasants' Revolt as being a sort of group of peasants who they weren't actually called peasants because the word peasant didn't exist in 1381. But anyway, that by the by, we always think of it as a group of peasants sort of marching on London and Wat Tyler and Jack Straw causing sort of mayhem and whatever. But as with all these things, and one reason why I find history such a sort of good learning tool for what's going on in our modern politics is that it's the same then in 1381 as now. You've got many different interest groups involved in the Peasants' Revolt, including some very sort of Farageist type people, and people not dissimilar to the Tufton Street think tanks are basically trying to make money out of the chaos, and take advantage of the situation. I think those think tanks, have visited massive chaos on this country. You only have to see, Liz Truss's entire philosophy is born out of those Tufton Street loony theories, which are not rooted in any sort of sentient logic or progress for the country. And as you say, they all look to America, all of them, including Farage. They want an American model. Well, anyone who's spent any time in the States or knows anyone who's lived there knows that is definitely not the model that any sane, mature democracy should be following in any sense.
Yeah. I was in the opinion that quite a lot of it was influenced directly from America by the Heritage Foundation, even the Council for National Policy.
Yeah.
But that seems to drip feed the sort of the English think tanks like your Tufton Streets and stuff like that. And unfortunately, it all boils down to just making money, privatization.
Yeah. And very rich people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Rishi Sunak, who have no inkling what the real world is like and never really will. That totally I think someone like Mogg is quite interesting because I think he's where a lot of the sort of the sort of streams meet into the river of the Brexit chaos. Because I think ideologically, he's the classic old fogey from teenage years who did dream and believe in that sort of mythical British past of, Dunkirk spirit and like Our Island Story, which is a book I'll write about in both my notes.
Yeah.
This kind of idea that Britain, England in particular, everything about it was good. Even the bad stuff was good. Even the bad kings in English history are good. So I think there's that. But Mogg also has his banking and business interests. So the two things kind of collide, suit him and a very close-knit small group of out-of-touch, aristocratic, wealthy people. I mean, that was a definite driver of Brexit.
Yeah. There was such a fetishization of, as you say, that Dunkirk spirit, D-Day, Churchill, just a lot of nonsense talks about the war, and bizarrely tying it to race, like in a way that was completely ahistorical. I mean, you've written yourself, it's particularly about the myth of Dunkirk and the myth of Churchill, and the sort of the way that these people are fetishized by these groups. It is bizarre though, because I saw people criticizing your criticism of Churchill.
Yeah.
By you pointing out that actually, a lot of the things that he's supposed to have said, the witticisms he didn't, and blah blah blah. And to me, what was interesting was like them going, "Oh, you can't attack Churchill," proves your point.
Yeah. It's also what I find really weird is why would people prefer to believe in a bunch of lies and myths over the truth, which is often far more interesting? I'm not anti-Churchill. The guy died in 1965 and was essentially a Victorian who came from a complete different age. And Churchill did, during the Second World War, display remarkable leadership. Yes, the guy was an imperialist. Yes, the guy didn't want any, even as he's held up as this sort of beacon of freedom, he didn't believe in freedom for Ireland or India or Africa or any parts of the empire. He was very much a believer in empire. But there are good things about Churchill as well, not least his wife, who no one ever pays any attention to. But she was he was the original trolley. They called Boris Johnson the trolley.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill was the original trolley, and Clemmy, his wife, was constantly trying to steer him out of disaster. I mean, he plunged from one. Anyway, all that aside, he's not all bad, Churchill, but he's become a mythical martyr figure. And the very thing we criticize in states like North Korea or the Soviet Union, pulling people up on statues and saying these people are, irreproachable and you can't criticize anything. And this is the history and it always will be. That is not history. That is religion. And that is what this country is in very danger, on the very dangerous cusp of becoming a cult to British exceptionalism.
America has the exact same thing with like its past presidents.
Yeah, I mean, Abraham Lincoln. Yeah.
Exact same, like a mythical past again of who these people were. Even up to like someone like JFK, like we know how terrible the person was, like behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't know, have you ever been to Washington?
Yeah.
I mean, Washington is sort of, I mean, if you put Washington in another country like North Korea or Nazi Germany, I think people would be really questioning what's going on around.
Oh, very much so.
These massive monuments, this sort of Greco-Roman architecture everywhere, and these huge, the Lincoln Memorial, the huge statue. Again, it's the very thing that America criticizes about other people.
Yeah,
they have it in the capital city. And Abraham Lincoln has become an unimpeachable god. Kennedy, to a large extent, has become fairly unimpeachable. And, all the conspiracy theories around his assassination have only added fuel to that particular fire.
Yeah, totally.
And they are conspiracy theories, And weirdly, that was the one thing when I was promoting my second book last year, that was the one thing I kept coming up against. People going, yeah, but, there's something in it about the Kennedy assassination. Like really, people I like and really, and I still like them. I don't like his song because they kind of, but that JFK film by Oliver Stone is, unbelievably. I mean, it's just garbage. I mean, it's a lesson in conspiracy, and because it's full of really famous people, it's continued to have a currency where, really, it's also incredibly boring. But apart from being, and I know that because I had to sit through it again whilst I was writing. I struggled to get through. Really boring. But just he edited out all the stuff which, if you really read the story of JFK, largely disproves the conspiracy theories and just left it nakedly as it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to rewatch JFK since I've come out of the rabbit hole, with new eyes. Let me see what this is like. and I was blown away by how much Jim Garrison, the lawyer, was a full-on conspiracist, and he was just editing the information coming in to only suit his narrative. And I was just watching that. I was like, Jesus Christ, this guy is...
And a homophobe, Brent.
Yeah.
True.
He pursued...
Clay Davis. No, not Clay Davis.
I can't remember his name.
Tommy Lee Jones in the film.
Yeah, Tommy Lee Jones in the film. In real life, that guy was a former... He'd won like the Croix de Guerre. He'd been like he was a really respectable guy who loved art and everything, and was like and was in the closet, clearly in the closet. And so this poor guy got trapped in this terrible situation where they'd basically decided he was guilty and then conspired to try and prove he was guilty. He had absolutely nothing to do with it. And it's like me pointing at the next guy who comes down the footpath outside my house and saying, oh, he was responsible for murdering Princess Diana. And then me setting up some elaborate conspiracy to try and prove it. I mean, it's completely barking mad. But a lot of people believe that because they've seen the film and they therefore believe what they see on the screen. And that's another really big problem, which I don't think we acknowledge enough. Because a lot of people get their history and their information from movies and movies.
Yeah, very much so.
Just for reference, the guy is Clay Shaw.
Clay Shaw, that was it. Clay Bertram was his pseudonym that he had, I think. Yeah. But anyway, going back to what you were saying about conspiracy theories in Washington and such like that. It was just interesting when you were saying about the monuments and so have you heard the concept of the street design having certain occult significance?
Go on, tell me.
Well, the idea is, and there's a grain of truth to it, that the guy that originally designed the street design was a chap called L'Enfant, and he believed in certain Freemasonic principles and was a bit into kind of, he liked an angle. Loved a triangle, he did.
Oh, I do know this. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the Freemasons, and that's why you've got the pyramid on the dollar bill.
That's to do with a guy called Nicholas Roerich and Henry Wallace, was it? And again, that's because he was quite into mysticism and stuff like that. It doesn't prove a grand conspiracy. It proves that one person was into some very, very wacky stuff. Nicholas Roerich was this mystic who an artist that claimed to be in possession of something called the Chintamani stone, which is either the pillow stone of Jacob, which was chipped off the stone of Scone from the recent
the throne.
Yeah. Or and this is the one that people tend to favor. It's the jewel in the crown that was knocked off of Lucifer's head during the fall of the seraph or whatever to Earth. So. And anyway, it was because of that guy that Henry Wallace decided to put a phoenix on one side of the dollar bill and a pyramid on the other side of the dollar bill.
Oh, you gotta love it.
Yeah.
I mean, flipping. I mean, it's all. You always wonder whether someone should just plant some conspiracy theories.
What he did.
But just to sort of expose our stupidness. But the trouble is that then, when you do that, it's a bit like Winterval. That was a made-up conspiracy theory, which kind of took on a life of its own. In Birmingham, I haven't got the facts in front of me, but in Birmingham, about 20 years ago, they had a winter festival, and it stirred controversy with the tabloids. And an academic, and he might well have been at University of Birmingham, but I'm not entirely sure. He kind of thought, I wonder if we can run with this, and started claiming that there was a Winterfell festival that was going to replace
Christmas and everything. Oh, yes.
And every year still, you'll get the Express and papers saying, oh, they've banned Christmas and they're introducing Winterfell, And
it's in many ways, it's become a Christmas tradition.
Gather ye children and listen to
absolutely
how Winterfell was created by an academic. Yeah.
I'm just curious, before I go on to talk about reform, because I really want to pick your brains about reform. But going back to Churchill, obviously you were searching for your book and stuff like that. There are two conspiracy theories that are prominent around Churchill. One is less sensible, is that his father was Jack the Ripper. Did you stumble across any of that?
No.
Right, well.
but pretty much everybody who had some public profile in the late 19th century has been accused of being Jack the Ripper at some point or another. I think with the exception maybe of Queen Victoria, I don't think anyone really got away with it. That's the cracker.
Well,
that's the
well, she ordered it, didn't she? Like in the Gull theory, in the Sir William Gull theory. The other Churchill thing that is often bandied around, and this is spoken by some as if it's absolute fact, that the victory symbol was actually designed by Aleister Crowley and is a magical sigil representing the devil to fight against the esoteric forces of Nazis. Did you stumble across anything that?
No, I didn't. No.
I used to believe that one.
Did you?
Yeah. I used to think quite a lot about Churchill. I think it was like that was supposed to be like 13 degrees as well. The span or something between it is 13 degrees, an angle of the peace sign. But also that he was a druid.
Yeah.
Yes.
But he was initiated into the order of druids or something. But it turns out he wasn't. He actually wasn't. There's pictures of him dressed as one, but that's because the Druid Council made him an honorary member. So he wasn't actually practicing druidism, but I didn't know that. I just believed he was practicing druidry. And then his granddaughter played a part in setting up the Glastonbury Festival as well. That was all magical as well because of the pyramid and all this. Yeah, we won't get into that. We're interviewing you. Let's go.
No, it's good stuff. Let me just make some notes. Let me plagiarize your podcast. No, that's amazing. There's all sorts of nonsense about it. There's a story which I've heard quite sensible people repeat, which is that he used to chew cocaine chewing gum.
Yes,
with Queen Victoria. It's absolute bollocks.
Is it? Oh, that's a shame.
He's not Michael Gove.
What's the other one? Oh, there's one about him having a swearing cockatoo or parrot.
Yes, I've heard that.
Which did a perfect impersonation of him, and we'll fight them on the effing beaches or something like that. And that's also not true. He did briefly have some kind of exotic bird, but it didn't speak, and it certainly didn't swear. It's amazing. It's amazing what people believe once you create a sort of iconic figure like that and start, attributing all sorts of nonsense. Like the Darkest Hour film, which, leaves me shouting at the TV like I'm having a marital row. That scene when he goes into the underground, absolutely preposterous. Absolutely preposterous that he did that. And yet there are people who believe it really happened. So a friend of mine runs a cafe, and a friend of hers was involved in making that movie and insists that it was true, even though it's quite patent nonsense.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting how film can affect the thing. Even the concept of the storming of the Winter Palace.
Yeah,
like the idea that people went in and blah blah blah. That came from the Sergei Eisenstein film, didn't it? It never actually happened.
They had a staged reconstruction.
Yeah,
where they got 10,000 people to rush into the building. In reality, it was very much like the sort of storming of the Capitol. A few Bolsheviks went in, and the politicians who were there, because of course the Tsar had already been overthrown earlier that year in February. So a few Bolsheviks went in, and they went from room to room ransacking everything. It was much more like the storming of the Capitol. But you're right, that film, the filmed images of that staged reenactment, I think in 1922,
something like that, yeah,
led to the belief that thousands of people had stormed the Winter Palace.
I think they all got lost as well and had to be led out by members of staff. What you were saying earlier as well about this sort of hero worship, particularly in America and thing. One of that interests me is like that's number one or number two or something on Umberto Eco's fascism scale. Like, and people don't seem to realize that, but they'll attribute great sort of lionization to people who are essentially toads of people, like very transparent grifters and con men. And with that in mind, let's talk about Nigel Farage. Like
a perfect link from Neil.
What's right? I'm interested in this. What is Reform doing? Right. Obviously, they're financed by a lot of dark money. Now, the way that I see it, they've got three options. Either they're just there to try and pressure the Conservative Party to move further to the right by whipping up this idea that that's what the public want. Or two, they genuinely think that by being more extreme than the Conservatives, they can actually get votes and become a legitimate political force. Or three, and this is where I'm falling, that it's all a big con. They just want to get donations. They don't believe they're going to achieve anything. And once everything's all done, they're going to take that money and quietly sod off.
So let's talk about the name. I think there's a lot of truth in all three of those things. I think you're also ascribing too much logic and intelligence to them. And this is another thing that we always have to take into account. That these people are not necessarily as clever as we think. I have this on all the time on social media. People going, well, we had it with Boris Johnson. Oh, he's deliberately talked about Peppa Pig just to blow something, the dead cat strategy. The dead cat strategy, which is when you want to distract from some disaster, you throw a dead cat on the table, is a thing. And they have done it in the past. But everything is not a dead cat. Boris Johnson was just a truly terrible and incompetent politician without any imagination at all, whose default setting was to build bridges or fail to build bridges and to try and sleep with whoever during the many marriages that he had in the past. Anyway, the Reform Party, again, I think there's a lot of making it up as they go along. And we have to remember that the politainment, as I call it, the turning of politics into entertainment, is a business model. You can build an entire and successful career out of being a kind of populist politician. In fact, the most famous example of that is Adolf Hitler, who in the late 1930s was not just Germany, but Europe's best-selling author. He made millions out of Mein Kampf.
Really? Oh. I didn't realize that.
We forget that people were selling sort of, go to the shop stuff back in the 1930s. And that's what Hitler did. Pretty much every household in Germany had a copy of Mein Kampf. And they gave it to babies, I think, when they were born. And they gave it to people when they got married. And as a result, he sold millions of copies and became a best-selling author. Anyway, respect. That was a Freudian slip. Reform was set up. His initial notion, and it's on record somewhere, he said Brexit is done, and now I'm going to tackle the great injustice of our political system and the lack of alternative voting or proportional representation or whatever he's backing, and reform of the House of Lords. And that's why it's called Reform. But they seem to have forgotten that just about as soon as they opened their website. I mean, weirdly, of course he backs parliamentary reform like that because he wants the power he had as an MEP, which was done on a kind of form of alternative voting. So he knows he will get more power that way. I believe, to some extent, that part of Farage never wants to win anything because the moment he actually gains any power, real power, but even being a member of parliament, is the moment that scrutiny comes, and he is far better off really being a heckler at the side of the match rather than making a fool of himself with tennis balls hitting him in all sorts of amusing places. So I part of me thinks that. Part of me thinks also that it's a bit like doing a podcast or making a newspaper or writing a book. You've got to keep things moving. You've got to keep in the spotlight. You've got to keep the conversation going because they are generating money. And he has got a had a successful media career, and he has had that show on GB News. And his raison d'etre rests on him being this populist man of the people, and that's his USP, isn't it? That's what sells Nigel Farage. So he has to keep doing stuff. It's a bit like plate spinning. He has to keep spinning the plates in order to remain relevant. So I don't think it's some massive conspiracy. I think it's a way of keeping Nigel Farage the most important politician of our age. And what does that tell you about Britain in the early 21st century? That a man without any real ideas or any proper proposals or any real caliber has become the leading politician of our day, or even a seat in Parliament. It's bonkers, really.
Why does he get so much traction from the mainstream media?
Because he's colourful.
Because it sells, essentially.
Yeah, it's that term, politainment. It gets clicks. You put Farage on Question Time, all the people on social media will go nuts. His name will be trending within an hour. You put Nigel Farage on a politics programme, or even you go to run for a seat in Clacton, and people go nuts. Because in a world of political beige, he is political colour.
True.
And that's the same reason people obsess over people like Lee Anderson.
Yeah.
It's the same, the more crazy things Lee Anderson says, the more people will click and the more of a profile he'll get. And Lee Anderson, of course, has made a good living out of GB News over the last year, much more than he's made out of politics.
It's such a cynical and dismal existence, though, isn't it? Like, just basically being like a hate figure. It's like being a heel in wrestling, but all the time. And that your fans are the worst possible people on the planet. It's like, it must be so incredibly draining. Like, but at the same time, it's very, very profitable. You've got a whole raft of people, sort of, an ecosystem of your Lawrence Foxes and your Calvin Robinsons and your Tommy Robinsons and all these people that basically they're swirling around this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's almost like, politics has been like the sort of almost like the boy bands of our era, hasn't it? Everyone's got their favourite or their least favourite. You've got Katie Hopkins and people like that. You're absolutely right. People have, and Ben Shapiro in the States.
Oh, Christ.
Same thing. Ben Shapiro. I'll tell you a very interesting thing I noticed with a lot of those American influencers. They all talk incredibly quickly, but they talk absolute nonsense. But it gives the impression of being well informed and knowledgeable. And people like Shapiro have made a fortune out of politainment, of being political entertainment.
Yeah.
And this is we need. Starmer divides the left. My son, who's about to vote for the first time and is now interested in politics, keeps going, but they're not really left wing, all this kind of stuff, and he's right. But again, the political system in this country is broken on a first past the post system. And until somebody reforms that and changes it, we're going to have this same nonsense repeat and repeat and repeat. But the one good thing I think about Starmer is we're about to enter a period of very boring politics. And if we needed boring politics more, this is the moment.
Hopefully, you're right, but as what we're seeing is the ratcheting up. Several things that have happened with reform just in the past couple of days. I think something that you brought attention to with most people. They're all following this Gary Frakes guy, and on LBC, Farage went on and just was openly racist. He accused of Black Lives Matter and Stand Up to Racism of being Soros cutouts, essentially.
Yeah. How does he get away with that? And what the hell are the regulators doing? This is the dangerous thing. They have opened there was a sort of, I hate the term gentleman's agreement, but there was a sort of gentleman's agreement in the past that if you said something really nutty,
you fell on your sword.
Yeah, you fell on your sword, or you got cancelled.
Yes.
I mean, there was a Carol Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's daughter, about 10 or 15 years ago, Carol Thatcher had a sort of journalistic career in the 70s and 80s, but she sort of came back as a guest on shows and things. And she said something mildly racist. I can't even remember what it was at this distance. And we never really saw Carol Thatcher ever again, because back in 2010, up until 2010, it felt like those battles had been won and you couldn't go around saying racist or bigoted things. And then, of course, Gordon Brown described that lady as a bigoted woman. And ever since, there has been this, why can't we say that? It's how people feel. This is what most people think. And so the door has been inched open and now thrown open, and it seems that it is once again perfectly acceptable to be homophobic, transphobic, racist, bigoted, just generally nasty, and you'll have a career. And that is the great wound in our society, which really, really needs to be fixed. And hopefully the Band-Aid of Starmerism will patch some of that up. But, I get sick to death. I do it, not because it's a complete waste of my time calling out racists on Twitter. It's a complete waste of my time. I do it because it totally winds me up. I am genuinely angry with racists thinking they can go around expressing ghastly racist opinions. We should not be at this stage in a modern society.
Absolutely.
And reform, as you say, it seems to be chock full. When they did, when the Brexit Party was created 5 or 6 years ago, I was it 5? I lost track of when it was. 4 years ago, I think it was. Anyway, whenever it was. And they stood for the EU Parliament one last time. I forensically went through a lot of their lists. And I uprooted a lot of those similar types of people that we're now seeing coming through again. And I also showed the links that the Brexit Party had to former members of the Revolutionary Communist Party, which sounds like a conspiracy theory. Yeah? Of course, everybody started to go, oh, you model yourself on speaking the truth. You're spouting this conspiracy theory about them being ex-members of the Revolutionary Communist Party. Yes, because if you've got the Revolutionary Communist Party was a tiny political party. If you've got about 20 former members of the Revolutionary Communist Party in the Brexit Party, clearly something's going. Clearly something is going on.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. That is.
Yeah, they have pulled back a little bit. But the imprint of people like Claire Fox, who was a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, who was a Brexit Party MEP, and many of her friends remains on that political movement.
Why would the members of the Revolutionary Communist Party favour Brexit?
The Revolutionary Communist Party was a Trotskyite group set up in the 1970s by a man called Frank Furedi, who's a lecturer at the University of Kent. I believe he still is a lecturer at the University of Kent. And from the 70s into the 80s, he attracted people like Munira Mirza, who was later to become Boris Johnson's, one of his chief operation people, both as Mayor of London and then later as Prime Minister. And Claire Fox was the publisher of their glossy magazine, which was called Living Marxism, which was a very glossy sort of anti-establishment magazine. And it all went south for them when they basically accused ITN and Guardian journalists of faking stuff around the Srebrenica massacre and events in former Yugoslavia. And they lost a libel case and the magazine collapsed and the Revolutionary Communist Party disappeared. And overnight, they started up again as Spiked Online.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought Spike was like from the Koch brothers, don't they get money from them?
Yeah. I mean, this is a conversation that could go on for hours.
Okay, right. We've opened a can of worms here.
Very long story short, they became libertarians, and they became increasingly right wing.
Okay.
And if you only have to look at Spiked Online, it's full of sort of very right wing and libertarian points of view.
Yeah, it's very right wing. Yeah,
pro smoking, pro ownership of guns. They've the living Marxism after the Dunblane massacre brought out an issue saying we should all own guns.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went off on a bit of a tangent there, but the Reform Party has brought in all of these sort of different groups. You've got your sort of bog standard, I'll say what I like in my country types. You've got the Lee Anderson types of that ilk. And then you have got a residue of these other people who are libertarians who've latched onto the party because they think it's a way to sort of promulgate their message. So you've got lots of different interests, like Brexit itself. And yeah, I mean, bring on their destruction, because I don't think they'll win any seats.
Well, yeah. Well, let's hope. What's even more infuriating about it is the homophobia, the anti-trans, the anti-immigration stuff. Is that they frame it that they're the victims?
Yeah,
that they're the victims of these people, which is ridiculous, because that's been so picked up by the conspiracy crowd, which goes totally against what we're always told. It's like, have you ever noticed that they attack people who are basically simultaneously like going to take over the world, but yet don't have a platform to actually make an argument against these people? And like,
yeah, it's funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, bizarre.
Oh, I'm part of the establishment, and who pays me, and all this kind of stuff. Even as you have the Tufton Street people popping up on everything, who are a case of who pays you. I'm paid by the articles I write for magazines and others, and my books. I have no other income streams. I'm just a bloke who gets annoyed with people.
It is crazy. What was I going to say? Yeah, sorry. We've talked about this previously. What you're saying as well about the gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
We've spoken about this a lot. Do you think that it came in with Trump and people like Steve Bannon and stuff like that? Like, as you're saying, like, previously you lie to the House, you do this, you get caught, whatever. Okay. There's this unspoken agreement that you will honor and you will just walk away. And then one day somebody woke up and went, what if we don't? What if we just say no? What if I have no outward shame? What if I take that on board even as somehow like a macho trait? And then the whole system is screwed.
Yeah.
Because there's no real accountability. It was all on sort of, as you say, a gentleman's agreement. And if that goes out of the window, it's pure corruption.
But exactly the same thing happened with Boris Johnson. He ripped up the rule book. 30 years ago, Boris Johnson would never probably have become an MP, I don't think. And certainly he might have been a backbench MP, but he would never have risen to high office. His behavior and his chaos and his popping off to Lebedev's home in Italy and all of that stuff, you're ringing the alarm bells so hard, the steeple is shaking in its foundations and crashing down around you. What on earth is going on? And again, this country and America do not have the system to hold people to account if they get into great power. And that should really, really worry people because, again, not that I'm comparing either of those two people to Hitler, but this is how the Nazis rose. They took advantage of the system and then laughed in its face. So if we have allowed those two through the gates, who's to say that in 5 or 10 years, you're not going to have, and you will have, by the way, because this is, these people, everything gets turned up. The volume will be turned up and the brightness will be turned up, and you will have another Trump type or Farage type or Boris Johnson type in 5 or 10 years' time, probably emerge from social media and do it all again. And we need to be on guard to that. And ordinary people need to call it out and not just be sitting there quietly, not wanting to make a fuss. Because if you look at the attitude surveys in a place like the UK, people are broadly pretty liberal. If you want to feel good about this country, just look at people's attitudes about things and how they've shifted over 20 or 30 years on things like gay rights, same-sex marriage, even things like trans issues, which are still, there's still a lot of hostility. But what the likes of GB News say they're speaking for the ordinary person is not like that. And there's a class issue as well, where you get people sort of insisting that working class people are all a bunch of bigots. And we need to bend to their will. It's not true. It's not true. Across the board, you see attitudes, particularly around young people, are very liberal and are becoming more liberal. So I think there's a lot of hope, and we need to amplify those voices and turn down the voices of the likes of others.
It's interesting that you say that as well, because like that's what Farage and people like that, they claim to speak for the working class, and they're funded by dark money. Previously it was Aaron Banks,
and they're posh.
Yeah. Now it's people like George Farmer, who's Candace Owens' husband. Why do people fall for it?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, but this has always happened. You've always had very posh people who've claimed to speak for the ordinary person. I mean, Oswald Mosley was of that ilk, wasn't he? It's unbelievable that people continue to fall for it. That's all. Wake up, as they would say, to use their own term back again. Yeah.
Would you mind explaining dark money to some of our audience who don't understand what that means? They might think that means drug money or something.
Dark money from finance from large corporations that are slipped through by. I mean, that's what you're talking about, isn't it, Neil? Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So I mean, sources of dark money coming in. So people will fund their own interests. I was watching a brilliant video earlier today, a really depressing video actually, about how in the 1950s and 60s, in the 1930s, they encouraged women to smoke because they linked it to the rights of women in getting the vote.
Oh, Torches of Freedom.
Yeah, Torches of Freedom.
Yeah, Edward Bernays, wasn't it?
It, of course, was heavily funded by the tobacco industry, but it was AstroTurf. It was a fake grassroots movement set up to make it look like they were fighting for women's rights, but really they were trying to tap into an untapped audience of men. That kind of stuff, AstroTurfery and money being used to try and drive an agenda is as old as the hills. Yeah. Torches of Freedom. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah,
there was some women's rights movements, and at some point where the reporter just so happens to be there, they all got lucky strikes out apparently, and this was seen as them throwing off the shackles of patriarchal repression, and and it was all as I say, all arranged by Edward Bernays, that particular stunt. But yeah, so in regards to this upcoming election, what on earth is Rishi Sunak doing?
So, once again, going back to our cult of Brexit that we talked about right at the beginning, he is the product of that. If you've got ever diminishing leadership, and the guy might have made quite a good sort of runner-up on The Apprentice, but he really should not be leading a country. I can imagine him doing a task with pancakes or something, but he's not really fit to be Prime Minister. And he doesn't have a clue what he's doing. Now, again, I think some people have suggested, it's all deliberate. He's deliberately doing it. No, he isn't. He's just incompetent, completely out of touch, and focused like a sort of PR guy on trying to sell the image of Rishi Sunak. But the image of Rishi Sunak is not even as appealing as a packet of delicious Lucky Strike.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, the theory was that he knows that what he depended who you spoke to. Either there's an economic collapse coming, which there always is, or world war is coming, and he didn't want to be a wartime prime minister.
So my theory here is why he called the election. It's quite obvious why he called the election.
Because he was going to be ousted by his own party.
Well, also, he's going to lose it, and he's going to think about what's Rishi and the little Rishi is going to do next.
He wants to get to California before summer's over. That's it.
Well,
because he's bought a surfboard.
this will all be neatly out of the way by next school term.
Oh, it's even simpler than that. Oh, yeah. That makes perfect sense.
I don't think that's the main driver, but as a parent myself,
you've got to think of these things, haven't you?
Privately in the country, and I thought everything was going to collapse into turmoil. I might be dusting off the CV and thinking, "Oh, America, they welcomed Liz Truss. If they welcomed Liz Truss, think what they're going to do to me."
Christ,
Alex house in California, his flat.
Talk about the banality of evil. This is a man who's destroyed the country so that he can get his kids into school without him having to take time off.
I mean, we don't know for sure, but I genuinely, I believe I have read somewhere that they all feel much happier in America than family, and that's where they like to go. So I would really not be surprised. I don't know how old his kids are, but I would not be surprised if he didn't have one eye on all of that. Just giving himself a bit of a summer break.
Astonishing. I
mean, maybe I'm just, maybe there is some dark, malevolent force at work. But I think sometimes the most obvious answer is staring us in the face, and I genuinely think there's a good chance that's what it is. Yeah. Well, somebody who knows lots of parents, that's the kind of thing parents think about. Yeah. Even if you're in the country. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Andrew, I'm very conscious that we've had you for over an hour. We could talk to you there's so many things I'd love to talk to you about. Trump, Project 2025, Elon Musk, your books, aside from anything else as well. There are a couple of things that we have to ask you, though, if you wouldn't mind, just a couple more questions.
No, please.
In one of your books, I saw the tagline. I didn't get any further than this. The myth that the royal family is German.
Yeah.
Now that's quite in the conspiracy world. That's a real big deal.
Very important.
They are the Saxe-Coburg-Gothers, and it kind of ties back in, depending on how racist or whatever you are. You can tie that back into Rothschilds and all of this sort of silliness and stuff like that. And, international world banking cartels and things like that. So what's the actual truth on that?
First of all, dubbing the royal family German is a perfect way for the self-appointed upper classes in this country to look down on the Windsors.
Oh, nice.
When I was growing up in rural Essex, there was a large country estate with a sort of an old lady. I won't say what her name was, but there was an old lady there. And if you got them round the lunch table, they go, "Oh, of course." See, the royal family, they're very middle class.
Wow.
Middle class.
Wow.
That is one angle. The aristocratic upper classes in Britain who consider themselves much grander than the royal family, who are horribly middle class. Oh, so no. They have long fed this fantasy that there are a bunch of Germans who've popped over and whatever. That's one thing. Secondly, there are the conspiracy theorists. Thirdly, unfortunately, in this country, Germanophobia still runs rampant. And one way that British people feel good about themselves is to make jokes about the Germans and Basil Fawlty and all of that kind of stuff. And therefore, the sort of, if we can describe ourselves as oiks, we oiks kind of get off on saying, "Oh, but they're just a bunch of Germans." Yeah? It's another way of undermining it. Now, I am an out and out Republican, and I'm never going to be here to defend the royal family. But from a historical point of view, this is a load of nonsense. Because, yes, George I, who was a truly terrible human being, who effectively murdered his wife's lover before becoming King of England, because again, history is far more interesting than conspiracy. That's a conspiracy, and a real one, and no one ever seems to talk about it.
No one's interested in real conspiracies. They don't have space lizards.
That's a conspiracy. George I, the founder of the modern sort of the House of Hanover, pretty much had his love rival murdered. Anyway, he and his son George II were both born in Germany. So yes, if you want to go way back to the Sophia Act of whenever it was, 1704 or 5 or whatever, when they decided that these people would become our monarchs. So that 320 years ago, roughly, yes, those two people were German, but they weren't really, because they in turn were descendants of people from the various strands of the royal family. So there were people who were Polish, there were people who were from Scotland, there were people who were English. The royal families of Europe were really a sort of race unto themselves because they all intermarried among each other. So they'd have an English mother or whatever. So if you want to go, is somebody German? What does it really mean? I mean, it kind of goes back to what I'm always saying about Britain being a melting pot of peoples. Europe has long been a melting pot of peoples. So there's that. Yes, in the decades since and the hundreds of years since, other people, prominent people in the royal family, have been German, in inverted commas, including, of course, Queen Victoria's husband, Albert, and Mary of Teck, Queen Mary, who was said to be German, but she really wasn't that German. I think one of her parents or grandparents was half German. So you end up with everybody going, oh, they're German, but they're probably no more. Do you know who your great grandparents were in 1704?
My mum once did one of those ancestry things, and she was massively pissed off because she got back about sort of 10 generations and discovered that this person lived in the same village that we currently lived in.
That's one strand, you see, because we've all got 4 grandparents, 8 greats, 16 great-greats, 32 great-great-greats, 64, 128, etc. Now, if you go back far enough and dig hard enough, you will find that you are descended from a German 100%.
Yeah.
And you would probably quite recently. Somebody did this with Farage, actually.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I saw this, yeah.
It discovered that his great, or possibly great grandparents were German migrants. And he had no idea, because you wouldn't. Most of us don't know who all our great grandparents are. Similarly, I think when Boris Johnson and David Cameron did Who Do You Think You Are, they discovered that they had a fairly recent monarch. I think it might have been William IV, who was their great grandfather. They had no idea.
Yeah.
They had no idea. Now, you would think William IV was monarch in the early 19th century. You would think that that's quite a short time ago, and somebody in the family might have remembered.
Yeah. That just goes to show, yeah.
It dies out. The shadow of that memory dies out and people forget about it. So all 3 of us will 100% have a monarch as an ancestor, probably King John. All 3 of us will probably be descendants of King John. Almost. Adam Rutherford is very good on this. But we will be his direct descendants, almost certainly. But we will also be the descendants of the person who threw out his potty.
Yeah. Again, though, that's one of the sort of grand conspiracy type things. People point out that things like Britney Spears and Angelina Jolie, Madonna, and Brad Pitt and stuff. They're related to various presidents and such like that. And Danny Dyer, it transpires on the same program, was related to the king. And like in the conspiracy world, that basically goes.
They're part of the bloodline.
Yeah.
That's why they get the positions. And
yes, I cover this in Fake History actually. So Harold Brooks Barker put forward a theory that all American presidents were descendants of a king. Yeah, except for one guy where he couldn't make a link. But then, as I've just said, what you, me, Brent, every single person listening to this show, unless perhaps they live in East Asia, yeah. But anybody with that one European ancestor in the last 100 years or two will almost certainly be descended from Charlemagne or King John or one of the Richards or one of the Edwards. It's a numbers game. These people had large families and they propagated wildly.
Yeah.
And you will 100% be descended from someone. Or your task is to find who that person is.
Yeah.
But it is, and that's why the Danny Dyer thing was so funny. When I was doing my book tour on the first book, Fake History, I had this thing where I would say, and he found out his ancestor was a king. And then I'd say to the audience, but so are you. You are also all descended from kings. And you would find, I loved it, you'd have elderly couples go, I don't think I'm related to us. In the audience. And you say it to people and people don't believe it. So yes, you do have an ancestor that came from the same village you came from. Yeah. And yes, your name and your family name and all that stuff will come down for them. But there are the dead ends in family trees where you think, oh, that's annoying. What happened there?
Yeah.
That's the interesting bit. That's where your really interesting ancestors are. They are the dark matter of your ancestry, and you they're there, but you can't necessarily find them.
A friend of mine went to a public school, the one that you pay for, and one of the lads that he went to school with was desperately proud that his ancestors were related to Hitler. So it turns out that's not that impressive, actually.
Weirdly enough, I'm currently writing a third book, and I've been writing and researching about a guy who I call Willie Hitler, because he's not really called Willie Hitler. Some people called him Patrick, others called him Willie. Willie Hitler was from the Liverpudlian branch of the family. Did you know there was a Scouse Hitler?
Really?
Yeah, there were a lot of Hitlers knocking around, and after the war, almost all of them changed their names.
Well, yeah, you would, yeah. Right. Thank you so much for your time. We've got you. It would be a miss for us. We're talking about conspiracies. We're talking about the royal family. It would be a total a miss if we didn't ask, what's your opinion on Prince Andrew and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
Once again, look, Prince Andrew is somebody who is the very definition, the very demonstration of why you should not have a royal family.
Yes.
A rather stupid, hugely self-important, very entitled, very rich person whose bottom people have gone around kissing in all manners and forms for the last 60 how many years. His friendship with Epstein, his subsequent attempt to understand him, and when he should have immediately come out and said, that guy is appalling, and I want nothing to do with him. The stuff around his relationships with people in Epstein's circle, I would not comment on because I am not informed enough around them. But the very fact of being friends or knowing people who are subsequently revealed to be sex offenders does not make you necessarily complicit in that circle of evil, which is what it is. So I think anybody going after Andrew on that front has to find the silver bullet. Andrew himself is a truly appalling character, and the fact that he was friends with Epstein does not surprise me at all.
Okay. One last question, because I could pick your brain on a number of subjects for hours, but I'm very conscious that you've been very generous with your time already. What do you think is going to happen with the election in America this year? Trump, Biden, what's going to go off here?
Right. If I say what I think is going to happen and the opposite happens, just go back and delete this podcast.
Fine.
Let's do 2 takes.
Or do what Alex Jones does. Like, if you get it right, you got it right. if you get it wrong, you caused it to go wrong.
I think he's going to lose.
Trump.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there are several permutations and there are several things that could happen. One, Biden falls over on the campaign trail. Two, Biden has some terrible, health problem on the campaign trail. Both those things could happen. He's an elderly man.
Yes.
I have repeatedly looked at the numbers, and the trouble with America is that the system is fixed because you've got these stupid electoral colleges and all this kind of stuff. This primitive stuff from, again, going back to what we were talking about, you establish a country and you say, we're the greatest, and then nobody will fix anything. I mean, it's an undemocratic system which is skewed in favor of potential bad actors like Trump. But looking at the numbers, going with my gut, having been to America relatively recently and having family members out there and lots of friends out there, obviously some of those are former Republicans and whatever. My gut instinct is that Trump will appall a lot of good Americans, because we forget that there are a lot of good Americans, and the people who shout loudest and the most appalling things are not necessarily representative of that population. Also, the oil price has just gone in Biden's favor. Now, when I was in America 2 years ago, the one thing every single, and I've talked to people I meet in the street, I'm one of those or in supermarkets, the one thing literally everybody said to me was, the price of gas has gone up. And I believe, I might be wrong, that it's now heading in the other direction. That's all they're bothered about.
Yeah. And isn't it outrageously cheap there anyway?
Yeah. The cost of living in America is really expensive. They've got no healthcare system. But my instinct says Trump loses. My instinct, if you were to ask me on Farage, I wouldn't call it. I don't want Farage to win. But I think there are enough people in Clacton who might think that with his celebrity so big, it might actually do Clacton a favour to have him as their MP, because it might put them back on the map.
Do you think, going back to Brexit, that people should really learn a lesson from Brexit to not be complacent?
Yeah.
Because people like Farage will get in if they're being complacent.
Yeah, and don't forget, we need to fix this our system of electing politicians. And the best way anyone can do that is to vote tactically and get in as broad a swathe of people from the other parties as well, so that we can have some pressure put on Labour to encourage, reform of our political system, which it is really in need of. It's a creaking Hogwartian sort of 19th century brooms and whistles parliament, and it should be fit for the 21st century. You wouldn't cross the ocean in a boat built in 1800 that hasn't really been fixed up, would you? I mean, you wouldn't set off without your satellite navigation and an engine going, it worked back in 1800, so let's set sail now. Let's go around the world. Come on, lads. Yeah. And it's the same for democracy. The idea that that something fixed in 1776 or in 1805 is fit for modern use is a fallacy.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I've not really thought about it like that, to be quite honest. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. Andrew, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. As I say, I could keep you here for hours. But
thanks for having me. Yeah, but my family thanks you too for taking me away.
Well, if whenever you want to come back,
absolutely,
to discuss the election or your new book when it's written. If you'd like to plug your books.
So my two current books are Fake History, which was more political and about a lot of stuff we've been talking about today. And then Fake Heroes, which has a lot of stuff about conspiracy theories in it and the JFK assassination, and which sort of tries to go behind the mythos of great figures like Mother Teresa, Kennedy, Douglas Bader, John Wayne, and tell amusing, entertaining stories which get people interested. My books are popular history, and deliberately so, because I think some people might want to sit down with a book on 1381 and the Peasants' Revolt, but I want to tell the story from a sort of modern perspective and a modern point of view, and sort of say why it's relevant and why understanding our modern world is best done by looking at the past.
Excellent. And where can people find you on Twitter?
Otto_English. Just go looking for the trolls and you'll find me.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Thanks, mate. Thanks for coming on tonight. Brilliant.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.